Very happy to welcome Glenn Critchley from across the ditch, as they would say, over in New Zealand. He's the GM of Commercial and Consumer Business at the 1NZ Warriors. Glenn, welcome to the podcast.
Mate, thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. Like I said, you're across the ditch, as we say here in Australia, over in New Zealand. I always start by asking people how they got their start in sports. What about yourself? How did you get into the sports business world?
So it's a fairly long-winded one, to be honest. I've always been interested in sport. I think that's a fairly common thread when anyone's in the space. But grew up playing cricket, football. When I right at both, managed to work through university, and I looked at a couple of opportunities, particularly in the cricket front, and ended up after I'd done university and worked in my first jobs through marketing, had an opportunity to get over to the UK to play a bit of semi-professional cricket, earning a couple £100 a week to play cricket, which was good fun. And then while I was over there, did 12 months of contract work in marketing, and then one of the guys that I actually knew from an English guy from New Zealand that I played with in New Zealand, he was working for a company called Havas Sport. A job came up for an account executive, which involved a massive pay cut. But given the fact that I'd always wanted to work in sport, it was one of those ones for me that just had to throw my head in the ring, managed to get the job, and that was what.
And so those early gigs were more on the marketing side, on the brand side, and that was sort of what you traditionally done. But like, because you were playing cricket and you had that love for sport, you were sort of looking to get into that side, and it was sort of any means, any way, how?
Yeah, correct. I studied marketing and international business at university, and then my first job out of university was probably a dream job for most guys, and that was working at a brewery. So had a couple of years working for a brewery, another sort of 12, 18 months working for Telecom, which is now Spark in New Zealand, in the telco space. And then that was after that I took the opportunity to head to the UK. And like I said, did 12 months sort of contracting work with Samsung, which probably there's a little bit of sponsorship when I was in my time at DB and Telecom as well, but then with Samsung, with the relationship with Chelsea at that time. So did a little bit of work into that, and that was sort of really, I guess, whet the appetite, so to speak, when it came to sport, and mainly in the sponsorship space, because I think a lot of people out there would regularly want to work in sport just because they love sport. But I think working in sport and having a passion for sport are quite different. So as everyone will sort of say, it's a lot of weekends, a lot of long hours, and that passion certainly helps. But I find you end up separating your passion from your job, and you have to think a little bit sort of. Separate the two to be able to really deliver the best job you can do.
And working on that agency side at Havas, was that like another university degree, in that you got to work with different clients, different, from a partner side, started to understand that sponsorship space, and then also working with different sports?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was my first time in an agency space as well. So, again, had the brand side, and then to work for a couple of Havas, massive global agencies. So we worked with, my main role was around cricket and rugby at the time. I think it was a bit token that they threw the Kiwi on the All Blacks account and working with Adidas. But as a Kiwi living in London and spending your Novembers following the All Blacks round as they played England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, could have been worse jobs. But I think for me, again, looking at it and truly understanding, or trying to get an understanding of, I guess, the opportunity that sponsorships presents. Again, when you look at sponsorship, I think, it is a marketing channel. And I think, it's really easy for people, I guess, to get swept up in the, as I said before, the passion and the enjoyment of sport, particularly in the sports sponsorship space. But, I think that was really, really great space to be able to go, well, actually, from an agency world, when you're coming at it, you've got to work, I think, a lot harder when it's just rather than just being in a brand, because you're trying to sell that to a brand, to a client, and really make sure that they're leveraging that partnership as best they can, because ultimately that's what you're getting judged on. You're not the when you're the rights holder and you're working with an agency, so it's a lot on the agency to make sure that really works.
And was that sort of the spark for you to go sponsorship, and that commercial side of the business was a part that you wanted to work in?
To be honest, mate, I think I've sort of just organically transitioned in that space. So again, with a marketing background, I was really interested in probably the leverage in the activation space initially, and that's certainly what my role was when I was at Havas. Very much, like I say, account servicing with the clients that I had. But then while I was there, we started to delve. Once I'd had a couple of years in the role and started to understand the landscape a little bit more, particularly working with all of the counties, I think the first time that I was able to look at that commercial space was working with the guys down at Surrey and the Oval, and we were the agency that did the deal for Kia to become the naming rights partner.
Yep.
Back in whenever that was, a long time ago now, about 2009-ish, I think. So being involved in that deal, working with the guys at Surrey and then the team at Kia to bring that to life, that was probably the first time. Again, sitting across the table and negotiating the contracts, what assets are included, working to get the best result for both parties. That was, that was the first time. And again, I guess I look back at that now and the fact that, I haven't checked recently, but I'm pretty sure it's still called the Kia Oval.
Yeah, I think so.
For me, that's real success, right? And I sort of use that now when I'm talking about our partners at the One New Zealand Warriors. For me, the highlight is that we've had partners that have stuck around for, in the case of One New Zealand, they were previously Vodafone, but they've been with us since 1999. And there's a number of partners that are, multi-year deals. And, for me, it means that the deal's right. That they're driving that ROI, the value's there, and you're delivering. So that's I think where I have sort of evolved in my role.
So a lot of people in our part of the world, Australia and New Zealand, always look to either England and Europe or North America in trends and what's happening because it's a larger market, it's more sophistication, bigger budgets. You made that transition, back home, back to New Zealand to take up the role at One New Zealand Warriors as a sponsorship manager. What were some of the things that you brought in your bag of tricks coming back from the UK and sort of looking at the New Zealand sponsorship market when you came back home?
I think for me, and potentially what was maybe stand out as a candidate for that role was, I spent a number of years in the UK, also had some time in Asia and Singapore. So I think, as you say, you had that global experience. And I'll be honest, man, I do agree that we do look up to North America, to the UK, because I think it's just in most parts we are a couple of a trend cycle behind, which is great, and even from New Zealand's point of view, there's a lot of things that we can take learnings from out of Australia, as much as it pains me to say. But I think that's the reality is I've always been one, I can't remember which boss told me, but the idea of steal with pride, right? If there's a good idea, don't be too proud to take that idea and look at how that would reflect in your own backyard. So I think that certainly helped, and I guess that's something I've still continued to do in my time, and it was something I did when I was in the UK. I was still always looking at what's next, and you're trying to be ahead of the curve. And coming back to New Zealand, we do a lot of stuff great, but it is still looking at, okay, what else can we learn, and who's doing it well, whether that be internationally or even in our own backyard, and trying to look at what the guys at the Blues, the Breakers, Chiefs, Crusaders, whoever it might be, if there's someone doing something well, that's how do we learn from it and how can we utilize it ourselves.
Terrific. Your boss might have been listening to my podcast, because I use Steal with Pride a lot, and I stole that from Steve Jobs, who probably stole that from someone else.
Oh,
so
there we go. There we go.
I did want to ask you, about the Warriors, and I guess tell the audience a little bit about the Warriors, for the people that don't know, playing, in the National Rugby League, and tell us a little bit about the history and sort of where they're placed currently in the, I guess, Australasian sports market.
Yeah, so it's a pretty unique one, I think, with the Warriors. So the club started in 1995. One of the cool parts, I guess, from my background is I managed to be at the first game. I was 14 years old, I think, going back a few years now. So this will be our 30th season coming up in the NRL. So as a club, we're the only New Zealand club in the competition, so we were the first team to basically enter into the Trans-Tasman comp. So before Super Rugby started, before the netball franchises, before the A-League introduced the Wellington Phoenix. So we're sort of trailblazers in that sense. Over the years, I think, we're a club that's brought together the country, and I think, you just look at our fan base and it's such a diverse group of people. They're unbelievably passionate, but it is, I guess, a snapshot of New Zealand. We've got people from every walk of life, and the Warriors bring people together, and that's probably the part I love. I love the most is when you have a game day at Go Media Stadium, Mount Smart. It's nothing like it. It's probably as close, certainly in New Zealand, I think it's as close as you're going to get to some of the Premier League sort of football crowds. I know that a lot of teams don't like coming to Mount Smart to play their games, and that's ideal for us from a fan's point of view. We create that atmosphere.
And so from your point of view as sponsorship, and now that you've sort of grown in that role to be commercial and to consumer business, but staying on the commercial side, even though other teams, like you said, other New Zealand teams have entered, I guess, the market and being in that Trans-Tasman market, are you still positioning the Warriors as a trailblazer and a leader in that space into the New Zealand market?
Yeah, we try to. Certainly one of those things, I guess after 30 years, yes, you want to still be at the forefront of sport in terms of what we're trying to do, in terms of our work in the digital space or our game day and things like that. And again, going back to what I mentioned before around trying to create, I guess, ideas and looking offshore for those ideas just to stay at the forefront. And I know when you talk to our CEO, Cameron George, we're always looking at, how do we get better? How do we improve? And how do we be, in a lot of ways first with ideas? But I think for us, it's probably more, for me, when I look at how do we connect a brand with our club, it's around the fans. For me, again, maybe it's the marketing background, but certainly that's the conversation for me. It's, understanding the brands we work with or the potential brands we work with, understanding who their customer is, understanding what the crossover is with our fan base, and trying to identify the hook, the why behind, why they should partner us as opposed to spending, money on a TV ad or money, on radio or whatever that might be. And I think that's the beauty of sponsorship, whether that be sport, music, entertainment, whatever it might be. I think, you don't have that same level of passion. And like I said before, I think there's no more passionate fan in New Zealand than a one New Zealand Warriors fan.
And how much do you, like a lot of sponsorship folks are terrific at selling and looking at those deliverables and what a sponsor wants, but how important is, I guess, that marketing background for you in aligning what both your team, whether it be a digital and marketing team, can deliver? I joke that sometimes I'm a digital divorce counsellor working between sponsorship and digital and getting that right. But do you think your marketing background, but also marketing lens helps that relationship to work?
I'd like to think so. I think that, and I'm probably sure if you ask anyone who sells sponsorship, they'd say they're not a salesman. But I would like to think that my approach to selling is not selling. It is trying to find that solution or trying to create a partnership. I mean, even though I'm not a sort of a partnership sort of, I don't like that cliche much myself, but ultimately it is trying to solve a solution and trying to create an idea or bring an idea to a brand that is going to move them forward or shift the needle in some way, whatever that might be. And I think I always take an approach where I'm not trying to sell the assets we've got, whether that's a sign or a logo or a digital content or whatever it might be. Again, I feel like it's a bit cliche, but you're selling a solution, right? That's what you're trying to do, and that's from the agency background, is like actually we're trying to put a pitch towards a brand, and we're just trying to find an answer to that to that challenge that they've got. And if that happens to be us, and it happens to be a digital solution or a branding solution or a staff engagement solution, whatever it might be, then that's what we're trying to do. And I've always been one to focus on answering that first, and then if once they're in and they're part of the club, you can grow that relationship and maybe sort of start spreading that further and further. I think when just going back to what you mentioned with the working with the marketing team, and I think that's so important for us. Like we've got a really strong marketing team. And I think over the last, you've probably seen over the last couple of years with how our digital channels have just probably exploded. And for us, that's where that space is what so many of our partners want to be involved in. So there is a little bit of that, not so much divorce counselling, but there is a really robust conversation internally around how do we best utilise our digital channels for our commercial partners, and finding that sweet spot between leveraging a commercial partner, but also providing that unique content and that really natural, organic content that the fans want, and that line. Probably from my side, I want to cross it more than the marketing guys will let me, but it just shows from probably the part of the success we've had over the last sort of 18 months.
Well, as long as you stay in mediation and not get to the part of
Correct.
divorce counselling, it's the main thing. I did want to ask you sort of touched on it there, on how the landscape has changed and I guess the canvas for those solutions. If you look back at a deal like the Kia naming rights deal and those kind of things, it would have been a lot of bricks and mortar and physical signs, and now, like you said, as digital channels are growing, partners are now coming to you for digital assets, digital inclusions in your social content created that's purely for digital. How have you, I guess, stayed up to speed, but then also lent on, your digital and marketing folk to say, hey guys, again, not what can I sell? What's now part of our solution? What can we now offer our partners?
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the Kia deal. That I still remember that vividly. It was a pitch, an internal meeting where one of our guys would just sort of provide a bit of background as to what other agency clients are looking for. And Kia was looking for a major billboard site in London, and that's how it started. It was just purely brand, purely awareness. And that's where that one started. So to say it's evolved over the last few years is probably an understatement. But I think, from a Warriors perspective, again, it probably comes down to the different brands. There are still some of those brands that are actually, they need awareness, right? And that's just part of the marketing cycle where the sales cycle where they need to actually get more people to understand the brand, or if people are aware of the brand, it's how do you take that next step forward to consideration, etc. So. From our point of view, our partners are probably wanting to do a lot more in the digital space purely because that's where the audience is. Our digital channels are significantly higher than what you get from a broadcast, a traditional broadcast now. We've got nearly 500,000 people across our Facebook page, another 300 and something thousand on Instagram. TikTok is just blowing out of the water for us at the moment as well. So, that space is where the eyeballs are and where our fans are. So you want to, I guess, fish where the fish are, right? So I think that's just a natural progression into the space of, what we have to sell, and the I guess the brand assets or the logo assets probably underpin the partnership, because again, it comes down to, in my mind, how do you as a brand, how do you make being a fan better and how do you, as a brand, what can you do to make that the best experience possible to be a One New Zealand Warriors fan?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a point you made a little bit a while ago, like when you said you started, was the longevity of some of your partners. One New Zealand being one, previously Vodafone. Yep. Maintaining those partners as they mature and become mature, and provide that stability in your sponsorship portfolio. How is that, relationship both maintained and also, continually looking them after? Because there can be in some instances, they'll always be there. We're always good. How do you maintain that relationship and, refresh their assets and always be understanding of their goals as a year on year as with a long-term partner like One New Zealand?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, they've had a couple of CEOs in my time now. They've had a few people through the marketing doors, etc. So there is always change. Maybe the fact that I've been a constant at our end that might have helped. Who knows? But certainly it is a case of it's like any relationship in my mind, right? You got to get to know the people. Again, it's you do business with people, and if we can work with them, understand what they're trying to do. And I think over the years, part of it is that we've always driven and delivered results. I'm a huge one on that, and I think that's probably one of the areas of sponsorship that we're still not there with is measurement.
Yep.
I think it's just a space that people I don't think people invest enough in to make sure you're doing you're ticking the right boxes and you're getting the results that you set out to achieve with a partnership. But for us, it's always trying to be really clear. We sit down at the beginning of every year with all of our partners and understand, right, what is it this year? What are we trying to do this year? Ideally, would be getting 3 to 5 objectives, and we can sit down at the end of the year and go, right, did we nail that? Or you're not always going to do that, but where do we get it right? Where do we get it wrong? And you're always open to evolving. And again, like I say, with being a relationship, I think the key for me is that you put the contract in the drawer, and if you can do something for your partner to make it work and provide them with value, you do it. Because all it does in my mind, if you over deliver during the length of a contract, then when you come back to the negotiating table, you can show them all this value that you've done, and that provides you the best opportunity to upsell.
And definitely that piece of that relationship, not only looking to over deliver, but also having a flexible relationship and knowing how they work and being able to take advantage of changes to algorithms or platforms starting to blow up and then asking them, hey guys, do you want to try this? We're testing this. You're one of our most trusted partners. We want to come to you first. Is that again part of that trust building that you can have with a long-term partner?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's an interesting one. If you think about it from a marketing lens, again, you particularly now, and years gone by, you're doing annual brand planning and things like this. The world we're in now, I mean, it's quarterly, if not monthly. Things change so quickly. So in the sponsorship world, where you've got a 2, 3, 4 year contract that has all these assets listed out, what you might have agreed on in year 1, actually by the time you get to year 3, for whatever reason, that brand's trajectory would have changed. So therefore, the hospitality or the whatever it might be that they have in their agreement actually might be worthless to them at that point. So you've then got to make sure you're flexible enough to adjust and I guess look at how else you can provide value and say move and grow and evolve.
I mean, if there is a team that has learned to be flexible and adaptable, it will be the Warriors. If we look at the COVID affected seasons, the team being shunted and based in Australia for horrendously long times. From your point of view, again, no crowds, no games, in your country, no access to players. What was that like for you, both internally as a team, but then also looking back to your partners and trying to figure out what deliverables are when you had your hands tied in that sort of that time?
Yeah, I think that period is probably going to go down as one of the most, I guess, instrumental periods in the club's history, and particularly in terms of where we are now. I still, it's amazing. I still remember exactly where I was and exactly what I was doing when I got a call from our CEO saying we're not coming home, and the season's done. It's like, what? I guess, again, it comes back, I guess, probably a key theme for me is that relationship, right? So we did a piece of work going into the 2020 season with Turnstile. Again, I'm a big data guy in terms of research and numbers and backing things up. And I think, what the guys at Turnstile have done in terms of being able to take a research-led approach to evaluating a sponsorship and a fee is excellent. And so we had just done that piece of work, mainly to just look at, we hadn't really done that before. It was like, right, are we in the market? Where do we sit? Are we over? Are we under? What does that look like? And I didn't think it was going to have to be used in the way we did it, but it actually worked out, really well, because as soon as the competition was, put to a halt, and then after that, when we were shifted to Australia to keep the thing alive, we were able to sit down with every single one of our partners and essentially list out every single asset that we had, all the values attributed to each, and then we just said to them, look, let's cross a line through player hours, this, that, the other thing, tickets, all of that. We're not going to deliver that this year. We can't. So actually, rather than you paying us 100%, we've dropped, we've taken 50% of the value of your agreement out. So just pay us 50%, and we'll call that even, and just bear with us, and we'll just keep updating you as we can. And that sort of approach by we didn't try to provide value in other ways, because again, going back to what I was saying before, they'd agreed on certain assets within the agreement, and so for us to then try and even adding digital assets or whatever it might be, we're trying to claw back money that actually we probably had no right to. So it was just a case of keeping it, focusing on the relationship. I honestly, I remember I was sitting in the office for probably a good 2 to 3 days, and made a call to every single one of our sponsors and every single one of our corporate hospitality partners over those 2.5, 3 days, to tell them what I knew, and just be unbelievable. Like, our whole thing was transparency. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. But as soon as we know anything more, you'll know. And that was the approach we just kept taking throughout. And then we just held on for dear life, basically, and managed to get through it.
And I mean, that would have put a lot of trust and equity in those relationships. And like you said, is that they actually provide that foundation of the successes you're seeing now?
I think so. And again, that was so important for us. Just that we didn't know what was happening. I think that we're not unique to anyone in the world at that time. It was just a case of trying to do what we could, making decisions as best we could with the information that we had. But I think, again, everything I've done throughout my career has been based upon relationships. Whether that be sort of in sport or whether that be outside of sport, it's people that you deal with. And in the day, that's where, if you have that relationship and that's right, then you maybe do get cut a little bit extra slack when the times get really, really hard, and people are willing to go, okay, we understand where you sit, and we know you're doing the right thing. We know that actually you've got our best interests at heart. But yeah, it was definitely not something I want to be doing again anytime soon.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. I probably should be putting trigger warnings and those kind of things before I ask those questions for people who've gone through that, and people in long lockdowns like myself. But yeah, I definitely think the adaptability and that relationship piece is the only way that a lot of people got through and businesses got through. I wanted to touch on sort of coming out of that. Your role changed or expanded, if you will, from just pure commercial to commercial and consumer business. And so what does and sometimes consumer business means different things to different people. What does that expanded role mean?
So that essentially means revenue generation for the club in the most basic sense. So that's looking after sponsorship, corporate hospitality, ticketing, and membership. So again, coming out of COVID and coming back to New Zealand, we saw there's a real opportunity. When we came back in 2022, the fans that showed up when we came back for the Tigers game, probably one of the most incredible sporting moments I'll ever be part of. On the field, we were, weren't tracking that well, probably 12th or something like that when we came home. But there was just a sense of relief for people, and I think that that was just so cathartic for everyone. And I think for us then, that was probably the start of where we are now. So coming into my role with a ticketing and membership lens, it was a case of, we probably don't sell ticketing and membership like in Australia. Certainly not the membership space, and certainly not with what the AFL clubs do. And even if you look at, I guess, what some of the ticketing agent or ticketing sales teams do in the US and UK, etc. We will do advertising on social and sort of very inbound. So I guess it's for me with a bit more of a sales sort of focus on sales lens on things. It's trying to, how do we be more proactive in selling our memberships, selling our ticketing? What are our offers we can put into market, and make sure that our products are right. And then we've got a great marketing team that are going to create incredible content and incredible brand stories. And so therefore, to create that love for the brand. And then we've just got to make sure that we're there at the right time, the right place, at the right price for people to purchase tickets. And yeah, we saw last year was a bit of a perfect storm. I'd love to say it was all me, but I reckon our team finishing fourth would have probably helped. But we had, I think it was 6, 7 sold out games. across the year, and already coming into this year, we've set new records for our membership numbers. Corporate hospitality sold out for the year. It's just incredible. So that support's continued, and for us, we've just got to now make sure that that experience is there. So you take that AFL model whereby if you're not a real fan unless you're a member. For us, it's taking that as well and saying you don't have to come to 10 games to be a member. Come to 3 games and be a member, or live out of Auckland and still become a supporter member, and making sure we have those products that provide that value and people want to be associated, and then can say with pride that they're a member of the One New Zealand Warriors.
Yeah, I often discuss that the AFL club land, they've got it at guilt level marketing, where if you're a fan, you just automatically talk to someone else and they say, "Oh, you're a Warriors fan? What do you mean you're not a member? You've got to be a member."
Correct.
And so like you want to get it by ingrained in your fan base, but then also just that messaging. And I'm sure like your want for data from a commercial side now sort of being on the ticketing side and the membership side, there's a great synergy there to go, hey, I know the passion of this fan base. I know it's ready to be there. And don't sell yourself short in those sellouts, because you need to be able to execute when the team is playing well. But is it just something that you just want to keep building, and then because one side helps the other as the ticketing numbers go up, as the membership numbers go up, it makes you put your commercial hat back on, it makes that job a little bit easier.
Correct, and that's exactly right. So we've done a little bit of work, and continue to work with a company called Core Software out of the US, but got a couple of guys down based in Melbourne as well. They do an incredible job for us, and we're all about fan data. What do we know about our fan base? And historically, we've had their email address, but probably not a lot more than that. And so for us now is looking at those user journeys, marketing journeys, where it is like knowing that Sean, you've come over and watched the Knights. You're probably maybe a Knights fan more than a Warriors fan, but that's the game you always come to. Knowing those people that come every Saturday or whatever that might be. We've got to do a much better job of just continuing to build out that data, so we know Sean, he's into sport, he's got this, that, or the other thing is. So that's great from a club point of view, because we know that your favourite player is Sean Johnson, and this is what you like to do, and okay, well, that's how we make sure we've got the most relevant offers for you. But again, the more we know about you from a ticketing point of view, the more that helps from a commercial point of view, because we've got a greater profile of your demographics, your psychographics, what it is that makes you a One New Zealand Warriors fan, and take that information to our partners to be able to say, okay, well, here's a segment of fans that are, they've got a telco but they're looking to switch, or they're in the market for a car in the next 12 months, or whatever that might be. And we do a lot of work with Nielsen in terms of survey data, but that's probably more general pop. So we want to really make sure we can dive down as deep as we can into that, and rather than saying we've got 480,000 people on Facebook, it's saying, well, actually we've got 5,000 people that are in the market to buy a car in the next 3 months, because that's actually more valuable when you break it down.
Definitely. I mean, and again, having that commercial lens on the data side and the ticketing side allows you to take advantage of those spikes of success and those viral moments, like the team had last year's. For those who are in Europe or in the US that might not know, tell us a little bit about last year and the online phenomenon that was up the wires, and everyone sort of just getting on board with the team last year.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was incredible. I think, we've probably underperformed. I think it's over the history of the club. We've made the top 8, which is making the finals about 8 or 9 years. We've made the grand final twice, but we're still searching for our first premiership. We came off the back of a really, tough years off the back of COVID. So coming into this year, there's a really good buzz around the place. We had a new coach and I think, coming into 2023, not this year, that's 2024. Coming into 2023, there was a real good buzz about the place, and I guess there's a saying amongst Warriors fans, it's our year. Now it's always probably a bit tongue in cheek in years gone past, because as soon as we mathematically out of the running for the finals, next year becomes our year. But probably 2023 was, showed how incredible it was. And and again, there's a buzz around the team. Internally, the guys have done a lot of work, from a football department perspective in terms of the club culture and what it meant to be a Warrior while they were over in Australia, sort of reconnecting to New Zealand. And then that they put those performances together on the field, and the up the wires. I'd love to say, and everyone in the office would love to say it was their idea. I think Sean Johnson he's probably the closest to laying claims after we beat Cronulla. We had an incredible comeback victory against the Sharkies earlier in the year, and in the pouring rain down in Cronulla. And at the end of the interview he did with Channel 9, he just said, "Up the wires, baby." And it just went from there. I think, in years gone by, the Warriors don't win those games. And I think there was this newfound belief, and then it just grew. The boys dug out some tough victories. They, some really tough defeats as well. But they just kept showing it on the field, and I think the fans just kept getting behind it. And then, as I say, it just all like it had nothing to do with us, the up the wires. It just, the fans took over, and I think that's the best part of it, right? Because ultimately, we are just custodians for this club. It's one of those things that, there'll be someone after me, and there'll be a group of players after that current group of players, and actually, the fans are always going to be there. So it's certainly, the fact that it was driven by the fans probably made it even more special, and probably why it took off. And even now, you're watching any broadcast, like I was watching the cricket the other night, New Zealand, Pakistan, and some kids were on the telly and shouting up the wires. Ryan Fox, one of our best golfers, was playing in the DP World Tour, and everyone, every time he tees off, someone would just yell out up the wires. So it transcends probably New Zealand, and it's gone global, which is awesome.
I mean, it's a bit lightning in a bottle, and you're right that it's not about who's putting their hand up to say, "Yay, I invented it," or those kind of things. But whether it comes from a player or the fans, and it's adopted by a player, like when that type of thing goes, and I'm reminded of the Golden State Warriors, where they took strength in numbers. It effectively came off Steve Kerr's whiteboard. That's what he was saying to, every man up, 15 men deep, everyone's part of it, and they adopted it as a marketing slogan, so to speak. But because it had that authenticity of coming from the coach, then the fans latched onto it, and that became their thing. It's always something you want to be looking for, and not, be quick to, abandon a marketing slogan. If there's one out there that all your fans are latching onto, it's a really good, good case study to say, hey, run with it.
And that's exactly what our guys did. The back end of the year, we really leaned into the up the wires. And even this year, we're utilising up the wires, and it's just become a thing. So yeah, we've absolutely leaned into it. But again, the fact that it's driven by the fans, and I think that's the beauty of sport. You've got to, fans are what it's about, and that's what you've got to lean into when they come up with something as good as up the wires.
And just to give some context for international listeners, the Warriors outranked the All Blacks for top search terms on Google last year. So it just shows, and we all know the global, behemoth that the All Blacks are. So it just shows the online fervour that was behind the Warriors last year.
Yeah, and I think, mate, the interesting one for me, and it's always been something that's been there, and you'd be surprised at how many Warriors tattoos there are going around the place with the Tiki, our logo. But actually, one of our partners, the TAB, ran a pop-up activation space at one of the local shopping centres here, and they had queues of people, and that they had to turn them away from getting Warriors tattoos as we're in the lead up to the finals. So. Again, it's the beauty of sport. The fans' passion. I mean, I'm not a tattoo guy. I haven't got anything on my body, but maybe when we win that first championship, that's probably might be something that's worthwhile.
Yeah, well, that's it. The sponsorship guys like, how do I get a tattoo parlor? But the official tattoo parlor, or those kind of things. Yeah. But again, it does. As the commercial, you're looking at, this is what fan passion is. No one is. No one's putting a bank tattoo on their leg, or that's the connection you have with the sporting team, and that's one of the beauties. That's one of the things you can sell to a brand, to say, this is what our fans. If we execute this partnership right, some of that love and can be transferred across to you and what you're trying to do in the space.
It's almost word for word what I say to people is, you don't get that passion from anything else, and that's as I say, that's what we're trading off, right? We're a conduit for a brand to talk to a fan or talk to a customer that just happens to be a Warriors fan. So you just don't get that with many things. And so that's why I think working in sports so much fun.
Well, Glenn, I really do appreciate your time. I want to get to the Sports Geek closing five. You did mention that you went to the first Warriors game, which is an amazing factoid there that you did share. Not too many people were working, at clubs that they had attended the first game. But do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I was racking the brains. I'd love to say it was the Warriors, but no, I think the first one I went to was actually still at Mount Smart. It was the 1990 Commonwealth Games that we had in Auckland. So, went to the athletics. I think Mum's still got some photos of me lying on the chairs, but can't say I don't think I've ever been to athletics since, to be honest. But I'm pretty sure that was the first one.
1990, that would have been the debut of young Kathy Friedman, who went on to light the flame in Sydney 2000. So, famous Commonwealth Games.
Well, there's so many great memories from that. I think in terms of New Zealand sport, it was but there's a photo of me with one of the high jumpers or something, and that's what Mum's got, and that's how I know I was there.
Terrific. Polaroid. It's probably grainy. It probably looks like it's got 7 or 8 Instagram filters on it. You can't really make yourself out, but that's what photos were like back in 1990.
Correct. And now they're trying to replicate that finish.
Yeah, exactly. You would have been to a lot of sports events in your time. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food when you're at a sports event?
I'm probably nice and simple, hot chips and a hot dog on a stick. You can't beat, that's it for me. I think, you can get, there's a lot of talk around, globally around making, food and beer and all these wonderful things, but I like to keep it simple.
Not a problem. It's hot dogs and pies and chips are often the nomination. What's the first app you open in the morning?
It probably depends on the headspace when I wake up. It's probably emails, LinkedIn, or if I just want to avoid all things work, Instagram.
Oh, okay, terrific. Is there someone that you either follow who's a colleague or an author or someone you might follow online, and that the podcast listeners should give a follow to?
There's probably a couple for me. I mentioned Gemba earlier, and guys like Andrew Condon and locally Richard Houth, who's ex-Gemba and now Hanoko, mainly via LinkedIn, but do some great stuff. And then Jack Watts, who's Bastion, one of those independent agencies in Australia. He's a guy I connected with back in my Singapore days when we were working on the Asian Cup, and just an incredibly impressive guy. And it was only recently that I worked out how young he was when he presented at our conference, and it's just always stuck with me, that one. So I'd give those 3 a follow.
Amazing. And then lastly, what social media platform is your MVP? And you can answer that personally, and then maybe let us know what platform is your MVP, from a commercial and ticketing point of view for the Warriors.
Yeah, I think for me, again, LinkedIn is sort of I spend most of it, but then casually or socially, I've somehow got into TikTok and have lost many an hour.
It is the biggest time suck invented, I believe.
It's unbelievable, and there's some things on there I just like, wow, how do you get to that? But so that's probably me personally. Then from a club perspective, again, mentioned before Facebook and Instagram being really strong, but for us, TikTok's probably, again, not so much from a sales perspective, but just purely from a brand growth perspective, and really probably hitting a younger audience than what we probably traditionally meet as well. So, that's probably the main one for us at the moment.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. What is the best way for someone who's listened to this podcast, enjoyed it, to reach out to you?
Mate, LinkedIn's an easy one, or mate, we can chuck the email in the show notes as well. It's just glenn@warriors.kiwi. But I've always been happy if someone wants to reach out and take the time to reach out. I've always been happy to have a conversation, because I think maybe it's just a cold calling in me that when you reach out, you just have that connection. So happy to chat and help where I can.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time, sharing your insights, and hopefully either you're in my part of the world or I'm in your part of the world. We can catch up for a beer soon.
No, sounds good.